Tonight we look at the noble profession of ghost investigation. My guests tonight are providing a heroic service attempting to prove that death is not the end. Some of my guests have no choice. Ghosts follow them around like gate crashers at a party, and as firmly as they tell the ghosts to go away, they just won't. Maybe the ghosts have even followed them here to the studio tonight.
I'm Jason Carl, I'm a ghost investigator and I've spent 11 months living in Britain's most haunted house.
I'm Liz Linehan. Over the past few years I've interviewed hundreds of ordinary people who claim to have had first-hand experience of the supernatural. I remain completely open-minded.
I'm Stuart Hobson. I drive a bendy bus in Sheffield. My main passion in life is ghost hunting.
I'm Tony Cornell. I'm an investigator of psychical phenomena. I started off being very sceptical, but I'm quite sure now that there's something out there.
I'm Philip Wharton. I study anomalous phenomena, and in my spare time I make investigating equipment.
I'm Dave Williamson. I'm a bus inspector in Sheffield, and my speciality is ghost rescue, helping ghosts to pass on to the other side.
Dave, you're one of those who the ghosts follow around like little puppy dogs?
Not exactly followers, we invite them to come with us. That way we can help them, we calm them down, whatever's happened to them. We find out who they are, what's happened to them, why they're still here, why they haven't passed on, and then eventually we get our guides to help them pass on to the next world.
So at first, do the ghosts not want to come with you? Are they reluctant to come?
Sometimes some are a little unsure, very often frightened. In some senses. They're frightened of us. They've been around possibly some for 200 or 300 years. And they've tried to talk to people. Often where you get poltergeist activity, they're saying, I am here. See me, talk to me, I'm wanting help. We go in and suddenly say, oh, hello, we've got a ghost here. Who are you? First thing you go, fear. That's the first thing they see.
That the ghosts are scared?
The ghosts are actually scared of us. Because they finally, after all this time, find somebody who's actually talking to them.
So how do you finally convince them to come?
It's something that we've had to learn. Each individual case we go on is different. We've had all sorts of different people of different religions, etc. And each one is different. And very often we are prompted by our spirit guides to say the right thing to them.
Like?
Well, for example, we did the Stockbridge bypass. That was haunted by a monk. Now, for several years since they built the bypass, there was an accident every 2 months, at least, very often fatal. People have experienced the shape or the ghost of a monk appearing in the car, or they've seen him walking along the bypass. He's been on, strange but true. And 2 policemen and 2 security guards were absolutely terrified. 2 policemen actually had to have 6 months off work after. We formed an organisation that, well, we were a charity stunt. We just went out to see what we could see. I ended up actually talking to the monk, calming him down. Wasn't it one-sided, me saying, we're only here to help. And eventually, I was walking up the lane to where I knew this monk were, and a little voice says to me, mention God. Of course, what a fool I've been. He's a religious person, and as soon as I mentioned God, he calmed. And he said, I thought you were witches coming to send me to hell.
You're exorcising, really, aren't you?
A form of exorcising, but we don't call it exercise.
No.
Exercise it. The church calls it exorcism. We call it soul rescue.
Can I ask you, do you think you're exorcising the actual ghost, or do you think you're exorcising the minds of the people who see it?
Good question. I should say no, because I actually see the ghost itself.
Right.
I actually see the person who is there. If it's a relative, we go in and I can actually see the person. I'll describe the person, who it is, and I'll say, Did your mother, for an example, did your mother have, did she wear a little hat? Did she have a long dress and stuff like that? A bit of clairvoyance type of thing, if you like. But if she's making a nuisance of herself, and they wanted to go, which we actually did one, the mother in one house, she wouldn't go. It was her property.
Go where?
Now we pass them on to the, if you like, most people call it heaven, for the want of a better word. We call it the spirit world, and it's a place. There's the known light. Everybody speaks about the light. It is a bright light. It does appear, and it is. You can look at it, and it's very bright. Yet it doesn't actually hurt your eyes. And once they've passed through that world, through that light, they're into the next world, where everything's basically hunky-dory, if you like.
And they don't want to go in the first place because they're in a situation where, when alive, they felt comfortable, and so they don't want to leave.
Exactly. Sometimes they may have been shocked out of the body, a bit like the film Ghost. He was killed. He didn't realise he were even dead. Some people we've had are so evil in their own way, in their own lives, that they go towards the light, and what they actually see is their own evils reflected back on them, and therefore they daren't cross. They think they go into hell. But then they create their own hell by staying in limbo. It's like looking through a two-way mirror. They can see us, and yet they're still in their own world. Their own world is there.
So basically, the ghosts who are more happy when they're alive, the ones who live in a nice flat or whatever, are less likely to go to heaven when they die. They're more likely to stay in the situation where they're
Only
comfortable.
occasionally. It's not everyone. I mean, shall we say, after 1,000 people that die, 1,000 people will go to heaven. But out of 1 million, there'll probably be one that doesn't, for some reason or another. He might say, I'm her father, and before I went, I have forgot to pass this message. I forgot to say, I love you, or something stupid like that, which has happened. Until he can say, he can't pass.
And that's why you have seances then, to pass the messages on so that the ghosts are ready to
Very often, yeah.
move onwards.
But our seances are mainly development circles to help people who wish to build the psychic powers, or wish even proof.
Did a few of you have a seance last night? I know you were going to, or did
Yes,
you
we
just
did.
decide not to? You did?
Our group did. Sorry, it's me again, yeah. Our group did.
And this was to possibly bring some ghosts with you to the studio?
Not exactly, no. It was just a development circle, and one or two people at work who are interested in ghosts wish to come along and just have a discussion about ghosts, basically.
And of course there are some areas where you can't move for ghosts. For instance, Jason, didn't you live in one of Britain's most haunted houses?
Shingle Hall in Lancashire last year, yeah. And there are 21 different ghosts reportedly there. And literally scores of people, hundreds and hundreds of people go there to see the ghosts. Some sceptical, some believers, some expecting to see something and know what they're expecting to see, others not knowing anything at all, and they seem to see the same things and have the same kind of experiences again and again and again. And I, living there for 11 years, saw and experienced many, many different, hundreds of different things. But I don't believe myself to be psychic. I don't know if you believe you're psychic or if ghosts are attracted to you particularly. I don't believe that I'm psychic or that I'm special or that I have any powers as any other person would have. I don't believe that I'm special in any way. It's just that certain people are in a certain place at a certain time when the ghost seems to manifest. And certainly in some places like Shingle Hall, that seems to happen very regularly, possibly because of the location rather than the people. I mean, Shingle Hall, for example, is built on a double ley line crossing. And ley lines supposedly do tend to attract supernatural activity, and certainly poltergeist activity, ghosts being seen and sounds do happen on ley lines, and particularly at that place.
You started off as a skeptic, didn't you, Tony? And
Yes, I did.
Was it
At
in
the age
there?
of 14, I was at a school in Cambridge where everything was scientifically orientated, and I thought you could explain everything by science. And I had an argument with the local boys. They were saying, "Oh, you know, you don't sleep in the local churchyard because it's haunted." And I said, "Don't be silly." And I bragged about this, and I had to go and sleep in this damn churchyard. And I saw nothing. The most dangerous thing about it was getting out of the house at the age of 14 without my parents knowing, getting back in. But when I went to India as a young naval officer, I was still sceptical. And we went to the Nilgiri Hills in southern India, 6,000 feet up, all on leave. And I was told there was a fakir, a holy man, up on one of these mountains. So I got a taxi, and the taxi driver said up there, and I walked up, and there's a big flat piece of rock with a fissure in it. And you walk through this fissure, and you came out onto a big flat piece of rock overlooking the steaming plain 6,000 feet down, 5,000 feet. And here was this old man, about 70 odd, in a brown toga, making tea on a paraffin stove. And he knew I was there, and I was a cocky little devil. I mean, I really was. I got my commission up here, and he looked at me, and I think he got me weighed up pretty well, and he said, want some tea? I said, oh no, no time for tea. So he said, well, I suppose you come up here for me to entertain you. And he got me weighed up. He said, you're very material, I can see that. It's no good me talking about spirituality with you. But it's a long way up. I'll cut the story short, long way up.
Can I just ask one thing? Because
Right.
was he alive or dead?
No, he's alive.
Oh,
He's alive. I'm pretty sure so, anyway. But he may not have been when you hear the end of the story. Anyway, he gave me a lecture and said, now look, I'm not going to waste my time with you, but it's a long walk. Look over the hills, my son. He's standing here, and I thought, well, I've had one lecture. Look over the hills, it says, you will not see find wisdom at your feet. And I thought, oh my God, look over the hills. So I better look over the hills and get another lecture. And he's standing here, and I'm looking over the hills. And I think, this felt odd. Turn, he's not there. And I can't see him. I don't know where the hell he's got to. Pole vault, where? What? You see? And he's the other side of a stream that's coming out from another fissure higher up at 30 degrees, streaming down. I was very fit. I was a boxer. I couldn't got across there. And he's standing looking at me, smiling. The whole of the toga is brown, no water stains anywhere. I start walking towards him. He points to the hills again, you see, smiling. I still walk, and he points to the hill. I've done about 5 yards, five paces, that's all. He's about 30 paces away. So I thought, well, look, what the heck's going on here? And the voice says, now, my son, how about that? Would you like some tea? I said, oh, yes, please. And I went down that hill, not quite so cocky as I came up it. And I couldn't work it out at all, because there was no accomplice of any nature at all. And that shook me, and I thought, there's something in this subject. Oh, well, the boys, when I got back in the squadron, said, I hallucinated, Tony, a sunstroke, but it wasn't that. And I've been looking at it now 50 years, and there is something in the subject that is very worthy of investigation.
One of our researchers who's been in it the longest, who's done a lot of investigations into some very serious cases and some very good work, and he's quite a sceptical chap. At the end of a vigil, when we do a proper vigil, everything's written down. Everybody's in groups of 2 except or more, and if you cough or sneeze, you write it down so that another group can verify that that was the noise they heard. Bus screech to a halt one side, the group's got down, scream at the other side, well, you can cross it out because it's the same time. And at the end, you'll often say, come on, is there anything else? No. And this particular person, called him Dave, very sheepish looking, fits in, and he says, yeah, well, there was something. It was what? Well, while I was on the stairs, I'm sure I saw the silhouette of a rabbit go past. So we took them. I mean, the next committee meeting, he was given a carrot. And anyway, the very next vigil that was done at this particular place, we had a total novice group. They knew nothing. They just come onto the scene. They knew nothing about it, and the rabbit bit had been kept quite quiet. And at the end, again, anything else. And well, we've written down here on the stairs we had, and it was exactly the same spot. And this is months later. A small animal go past, maybe a rabbit, and Dave's face lit up, and the rest of us went, oh. So the actual place was 1400s, and there were rabbit warrens in the grounds, and rabbit was quite an important...
Well, you'd think that you get a lot of ghost rabbits, because you were saying that a lot of ghosts come from people which die very suddenly, and rabbits are constantly dying suddenly. I'm running them over every 10 minutes. Yeah.
Actually, there's a lovely story about a white rabbit in a very old book I've got. I can't quote the name of the book, it's well known. But this was a haunted house, and it wasn't lived in for a very long time. People went in and get out 3 months later. All I know is it's named as number 8, and it goes back to 1840, but it's a lovely story. And apparently a mother eventually took residence in this place, and she had 6 children. And there's a lovely story about suddenly they'd be having dinner, and they'd suddenly see this white rabbit, and they'd try and catch it, and they're upsetting the chairs and doing this, just tearing here and tearing there, and it would disappear through the wall. It's seen several times apparently. So it's animals as well, to say.
Now we've been talking only about benevolent ghosts, but of course, you were pushed up the stairs by a ghost, weren't you?
Yes, at Chillingham Castle when we did an all-night vigil last September.
It pushed you all the way up.
No, it was more of just a shove, and I turned round to have a word with the person that was so silly to push me, to try and frighten me. There was nobody there. The rest of the group were quite a way down the stairs. There's no way they could have pushed me and run back down the stairs.
One of the many things that happened to me at Shingle Hall before I actually lived there, when I'd actually visited it for a week, happened late autumn. One afternoon I was there with one friend of mine, and it has two entrances, the main entrance and the back door. The main entrance is a very old 10th century door, the back door is a normal modern one, which was locked. Anyway, we were on the drawbridge just outside the main front door, and the door was open. It's got a very big old metal iron catch, and the door was latched over with the catch, and there's a very big iron bolt that shoves across to lock the door. There's no modern lock on it. Anyway, we stood outside, there was no one in the house, no one else around, and suddenly the bolt just shot across. We heard it move. It wasn't a very loud noise, but I couldn't get back in the door. My keys were inside, the keys that I was borrowing, and the back door was locked, as I said, and so we had to actually break in, if you like, to the house. But luckily, one of the upstairs windows was slightly ajar, and so with the help of a ladder, we did manage to get in. But a lot of people would describe that experience as being benevolent, almost as if the ghost didn't want us to get back into the house, but I don't think it was. I think it was having a joke. I think a lot of spirits have a sense of humour, and that they interact with you in a comical way, if you like. And for example, your shove at Chillingham Castle, where I've also been, I would say that that is not necessarily benevolent, but almost to say hello, if you like, to say, yes, I'm here, not necessarily evil or nasty.
I think we ought to get on record that if you look at all the stuff that the society I'm attached to has investigated over the years, and all the files, and you'll find that nobody has ever had any serious damage done to them by a ghost. That belongs to the fiction writer. They don't. I mean, one of the things we have to do, you two, we all do, when we go into these places, is calm people down. And one of the things I always tell them is, look, I don't know of any case where anybody has ever had any damage done to them.
Except for the poisoning at the turn of the century.
Yes.
There was the case of the poisoning.
Well, I leave that one alone.
Well, ghosts were poisoning people.
No, it was reported.
Well, that was the alleged story.
It was the alleged story that the ghost was reporting. What actually we think happened was that the daughter was being interfered with by the father, and he died of poisoning. Now, in those days, there was death penalty or death penalty. So I think it is recorded that because there was alleged poltergeist activity and etc., and obviously the authorities could see through what was going on, it was put down to perhaps the poltergeist.
And nobody was ever...
No.
No.
So, but seriously, no, there is no actual recorded harm. A lot of things, you see, I have a different view on this from I think most, in that I would say that a lot of this is much more human. It is a human manifestation. The sense of humour is a sense of humour. It's a human sense of humour.
Well, people forget that ghosts are people too.
Yeah. But it's more living human than dead human. But yeah, and that it's actually more to do with the living people that are around and things.
You're saying it's people playing tricks on each other?
No, not tricks like that. Like, you know, obviously
When you say it's a human
fraudulent.
manifestation, how would you explain the example that I just gave, where a door with a big, enormous metal lock actually locked itself when there's no one in the house? How would you explain that within it?
I can't. But another explanation that a lot of people will come up with is psychokinesis, the ability of the mind to move matter, PK.
So I wanted to lock myself out of the house.
No,
You must have been trying to drop you a hint.
Not necessarily, and it doesn't mean that it
They
was
seem to be
you.
dropping you hints all the time.
It doesn't mean it was you. It could be anyone. In a lot of cases that we've studied, there tends to be a focus, a person that's living that's a focus, especially in poltergeist. I think hauntings have to be dealt separately, where you're seeing something from the past, as it were. But a lot of the movement ones, we would tend to say a focus of the human kind, and a lot of those plates and all that sort of thing, it's almost like an argument going on. I know a lot of people have reported, I mean, you have a blazing row, you know, your girlfriend or whatever has just, you know, really upset you. You don't mean to hit them with the plate or the saucepan. Well, you shouldn't. Yeah, whatever.
I don't hit them with the plate.
Oh, right.
Just don't need to be there.
Yeah, you just don't know.
No.
No, but you know,
I've
people
never hit anybody with either a plate or
exactly, and neither is a poltergeist. It's like an argument, and chucking something. You don't mean to hit them. You're aiming to the side. It's making a point, and it's just making a point. You know,
I don't know what he was locking him out for.
You do know what you've done.
Well, Liz, you've been a bit of a ghostly figure for the last, with your nice silver ghostly blouse on and everything. You come very much from the folklore tradition, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I do go out on overnight vigils, like most of the people here, with certain equipment to try and record anything that may happen during the course of the night. But my particular interest is actually why people believe in something else, why people believe in old legends like the Black Dog, for example, what people actually think of poltergeists and why they believe that they can possibly communicate with dead people, either known to them or not known to them.
And what have you come up with?
Well, probably got many, many more years of collecting data, interviews with people to actually go through before I can draw any conclusions at all. What interests me is that a lot of the people I've spoken to, I've done a lot of work in the north of England, especially in South Yorkshire where I live, and I'm always fascinated by how many down-to-earth people can tell stories about something they've seen or experienced and then qualify it by saying, and of course I don't believe in ghosts, you know, I don't care what's happened to me, but I still don't believe. Yeah.
My mother, in fact, is a sort of ghostly figure and doesn't believe in ghosts. And maybe I should put on the record at this point, my ghostly experience, which I did have, was I went to when I was a very young child. And I was going to actually ask about the poltergeist, because they always say that it's a manifestation of disturbed children.
No. We've done a survey, 500 cases. A friend of mine, Alan Gould, we published it about 1979, and there's no one common denominator in the poltergeist activity. Lots of people say it's children at the age of puberty, but I mean there are lots of families where they're children, but there's no one common denominator we can find anywhere at all.
I think stress has got to be the one that we found is stress, and I think children often get the blame, but we've also found that people before and after moving house, like 6 months either side, breakups, you know, just divorced, whatever, and retirement. When you know, for all these years you've been going to the same job, and then suddenly your routine changes, and a lot of people who have retired seem to say they've got poltergeist activity.
Well, you were saying just then about people moving houses, and that was a cause of stress. I would say that rather when people move a house, you often find that if a house has a reputation for being haunted, then that is when the haunting or the poltergeist, actually whatever it is that's occurring, occurs. And I personally, one of the houses that I grew up in Oxfordshire, when I moved in, although I was very young, things did happen. And it seems to me that when people move into a new house, although that may be a stressful situation, it's not to do with the stress, it's more to do with the ghost accepting the new people into the house or not, as the case may be, and that's why it's active.
In a case where you get people who've lived in a certain house for a long time, it may have a great history attached to it, and if they try and perform any alterations in that house, for some reason that sparks off activity.
Alterations, that comes up a lot. I've done about 800 cases investigating various things over the years, and that point comes up a lot. When they start altering the inside of the house, then things happen.
We
don't know why.
We were just
I'm buying a house next week and we're going to get it
Well,
altered.
don't start altering it.
Well, we are. The builders are booked, and now I'm
We're going to get a ghost.
I'll tell you my...
Let's hear your story.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never... It's a very nervous moment for me. My ghost experience was a very young child on holiday in the New Forest when I was a kid, and I went to bed. And it was an old house, no TV, no radio. So I checked the next day, and as I put my head on the pillow, I heard a party going on downstairs. Although we were the only family in the whole hotel, and I heard this party talking and laughing and chatting and so on. And I went downstairs the next morning, and I said, "Did you have a party last night?" And they said no. And I said, "Well, did you have a radio on? Perhaps there was a party being broadcast on the radio." Obviously, I couldn't think of any particular radio program which would just broadcast a party, because that would be very dull radio. Anyway, but to cut long story short, they said no. They said what you heard, I assume, was a ghost party.
And there's a history of it, was it?
I never asked. I don't know.
No.
I'm not sure.
Well,
But a whole party in a house. So I had a house full of people chattering about and making jokes. And it was only when I put my head to the pillow. When I took my head away from the pillow, there was nothing. So
and
it
you're
wasn't
perfectly sane and normal person.
Yeah, it was it wasn't a party in my head, sir. Because of course you're out of the group. Because most of the people in the group here, you seem to be pretty much uncategorical believers. But you were telling me before, you were showing me photos saying, that was
Well, some of the photographs that
this
you
one.
see, yes, that's very early. That's 1923.
And
in those days, people would go along to a psychic photographer, right, and they'd sit and have a portrait taken with the idea of getting a spirit extra on the photograph afterwards. There's a chap called Hope in Crewe. There are quite a number.
Well, there's a lot, because this one's got Shakespeare behind.
Something like
or
that.
the Shakespeare type.
And a lot of this stuff was faked, you see.
Yeah.
And it was done by double exposure. And I mean, it was shown to be the case, but there are lots of people who still believe in this kind of thing.
So this was a trend in the 20s. You'd
It
think
was.
they'd be reacting more, wouldn't you? You'd
Yeah.
think they'd be looking behind going,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, we actually have photographs that, well, shall we say, we think are ghosts. In fact,
Please.
well, we believe, I'll put it this way,
Right.
that these are the photographs that I was moving about. Not poltergeist activity, it's just slipping. These were taken on a clear night back in April 1995. There was no mist, there was no fog, there were no cars to cause exhaust. But here is the cowl and the shape of the Stocksbridge monk. Now if you look at this picture, we've also got the same cowl, the same part of the body. Two different pictures, exactly the same shape, or bar that little bit near as damn it. That way is facing that way, that way is facing that way.
Could you
And
take them out? Let us look at them. more
certainly
closely.
that's no
Do you mind?
problem. There's also a magnifying glass if anybody wants to.
What can you see,
check
Tony?
them
As
slightly
possibly
closer.
the most sceptical of the group.
Well, if I may just
not
add before he...
sceptical. I want to be balanced, you see. And you see, to me, with great respect, I can't make that a boy at all.
It looks... what, the whole
Where?
thing's the figure? There's the nose, there's the mouth, there's the eyes. Is that
Where?
what you're
There's
saying?
another one as well.
Like a
yeah.
big, like a kind of cat-like figure.
Oh, here, you mean the eyes there, like that?
No, eyes there.
Right.
You see, this is one of the inherent dangers of...
Well, this is...
That's right, you can
You-
see,
you
everybody
can-
sees something different.
Because I've got a big sort of lion-like thing with spittle coming out of his mouth. Ear there and ear there. And...
You're using your imagination.
No, I really mean
That's
this.
quite
but
possible.
nose...
That's quite possible.
You
But
got it
on
right
the
there.
whole, what is it?
No, good question. What is it?
Could it be- could it
You're
be-
no
It's only
fool,
what
you're
we-
no fool, you know your
we
camera.
believe
What is it?
it's a ghost.
I quite agree. We don't know what it is.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I was going to say, could it be breath? Could it be that you've caught you're exhaling,
No,
which
we
you
have-
wouldn't necessarily
If I could find a
see,
little bit.
but
The
the
photographer-
flash.
We do have
The
that.
photographer exhales.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the shrub.
So
Yeah,
it's blowing it out.
We do have somebody, but then again, you couldn't see your breath on that then.
Yeah.
It wasn't cold enough to feel your
Yeah,
breath.
sure.
Well, that
you
was
can't
the
see it
spittle
in,
coming out
in the
the mouth
normal
of the
light,
cat.
but the
I've seen
instantaneous
I
flash
have
on
got
the
another
light.
photograph. as I say.
But I've got an
It's just
untrained
one side,
eye.
I've got to take that out. Of actually somebody blowing smoke, just as a comparison.
I was going to ask, if we can change the subject a little bit, something which I know virtually nothing about, which I find exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking, is the notion of doppelgangers. The idea there's two... I mean, who's the doppelganger?
I don't know
Well-
much about this, but somebody saw mine once.
Really?
Now, this is a true story. When I was around perhaps 16, 17, I was meeting a friend of mine in town, in a Middle England town in Banbury. And I was actually walking around the town before I was to meet him. And he saw my father's car with me in it go past. And he wondered where I was going, so he telephoned my house and said, "Where's Jason going?" I was just seeing him go past in the car, and actually my dad answered the phone, and he was quite surprised that he had seen our car with my father and me. Now, it's all very well to say that someone would have looked like me, or it would have been the same car, or it would have been someone that was similar full stop in the same place, but it wasn't. I mean, you can't have those three different factors, the car, me and my father, in a place where we weren't. My father was at home, the car was at home, and I was in the town walking round. And yet he had seen exactly me, so convinced that he had called home to see why I wasn't meeting him.
And also there's a case in a school where the teacher was in the
That's
playground
right.
and teaching at the same time?
Yeah.
Is that,
No, that's another one similar to this. You probably know it. A school teacher looked at her record. She went from school to school to school, and you think, my God, she was a bad teacher. She wasn't. The situation simply was she's sitting at the desk like this, and the kids are all looking at her. And then they start laughing. And she knows why, because they're laughing and looking out into the playground, and they see her. And when she turns, or turned past tense, to look at herself, the thing disappeared. Headmaster would see her running up and down the gangway. So, oh, what are you doing? You should be in your classroom. She wasn't.
So they'd sack her for this?
No. It got so uncomfortable that they would say, well, you think, you know, you ought to carry on. I mean, this was happening quite often.
Usually
Now, when she got married, it all stopped, for some unknown reason.
You'll never see your own doppelganger?
Well, she never, the teacher never did. She knew when she turned to look at herself, she'd never see it. There's another one of two people walking down, I think it was Bridlington, walking down the pavement, and they saw a chap who they lived in the town and had gone to Australia, and said, "Hi, Bill," and he waved back to them. And they walked on and said, "Well, he must have come back." I said, "Oh, when do you think he came back?" That was it. He was still in Australia.